Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, my favourite, all-time favourite motor car, the Daimler Double Six V12. I'll explain why that is in a minute. The year was 1980, my first stint as a dealer principal, a Vauxhall dealer, selling the top-of-the-range Vauxhall Royale for £10,000, and the Jaguar and Daimler were the competition, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 more. I didn't think at the time I would ever be able to own one of those cars, and then I got a phone call about a friend in London, a chauffeur who'd been asked to dispose of a 4-year-old XJ6 3.4 that had proved very unreliable. Having that car, fixing it, that was my first taste of driving in a car of this type. 2 years later, I had the franchise, and I was selling the new XJ6 3.4 and 4.2 cars as part of an Austin Rover dealership. In 1986, I had the opportunity to start a brand new Jaguar dealership in West Yorkshire, and these new dealerships were being set up in preparation for the car known as the XJ40, which came out in October of that year. So my first experience of selling new models of Jaguar were cars that looked exactly like this. And this was the top of the range, the 5.3 litre V12. So what had happened at Jaguar in the early 1980s was a bit of a revolution really. So John Egan came along and he sorted out the component suppliers. He stopped the terrible unreliability of certain components that were being fitted to these cars. And by the mid-1980s, these were becoming a very reliable motor car. They'd always been stylish, they'd always been beautiful to drive, but they'd suffered from reliability issues, particularly in the late 1970s. Jaguar cars, and in particular Chairman Sir John Egan, were very keen that all of the dealers would be singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and so he had a dealer principals training course that was held at Browns Lane. And I was very excited to go down to the factory for my dealer principals training course. Day one of the training course took place in the showroom at Browns Lane, and this is how it went. Sir John opened the door of a Series 3 Jaguar XJ6 and he said, "One of the things that really annoys me is how your salesman shut the door of an XJ6 by pushing it down and then shoving on either corner to try and close the bonnet. Gentlemen, ladies, this is not how it's supposed to be done. You place your right hand underneath the grille and your left hand here. That's how you close it." And then he walked away. Now, all of these years later, I've probably driven almost everything there is. And if people were to ask me, as they sometimes do, what is the one car that you would say is the best of everything you've ever had? And I usually answer it this way. The car they'll bury me in is a Jaguar Sovereign V12 or a Daimler Double Six. It's just the ultimate in refinement and comfort. It was the car that in the 80s I could drive 400-500 miles in a day and still feel like getting out and having dinner. During all of the years that I sold Jaguar cars new, the competition was always Mercedes-Benz, and Mercedes made and still do make beautiful cars. But there was something about this car, this particular model, that was quintessentially British. It had a sort of understated class. The best way to describe this, I think, was a gentleman's club on wheels. Acres of wood, leather. It was just such a quiet, comfortable and refined place to be when you were travelling. When this car was new, you could buy this shape in various derivatives. The smallest engine was the 3.4 litre with manual transmission. Then you could have the 4.2, most of those were automatic. And then there was a higher trim level model called the Jaguar Sovereign 4.2. The top of the line model was the Daimler. And to understand why it was the top of the line, you have to understand how Jaguar got involved with Daimler in the first place. Back in 1961, Jaguar just wanted the Radford factory. There were very few products that Daimler had that Jaguar wanted to continue, but they needed the factory, and they were aware that Daimler had this sort of prestige clientele royalty, and lords and ladies tended to buy the Daimler. So they wanted something that was a little bit distinctive, a little bit upmarket from the slightly more basic Jaguar model. And so the Daimler had more individually shaped rear seats. It was the highest level of luxury, with alloy wheels, with an electrically operated height adjustment on the front seats. It had head restraints, many of them like this one had a sunroof. It had air conditioning, cruise control, and this wonderful 5.3 litre V12 engine. The model began with the XK engine in 3.4 litre or 4.2 litre form, and that's an engine that first saw life in 1948 in the XK 120. By the early 70s it was crying out for something more modern and more refined, and this engine, this basic V12 engine, which had taken years to develop, was first put into the E-Type Jaguar for 1971 model year. It was a 5,343cc V12 with 4 carburetors. Once it appeared in the later model Series 3s, it was fuel injected and had electronic ignition. 292 horsepower was the nominal power of it, and it was mated to GM's legendary GM 400 3-speed gearbox, and it meant you could quite literally go from 20 to almost 140 miles an hour in top gear. These were always a very smooth and very reliable engine, but something happened in the early 1980s which really revolutionized it. So for 1981 model year, you would see on the back of these cars it said HE, and HE stands for high efficiency. They have what's known as the May Fireball cylinder heads. This was a Swiss designer who helped Jaguar achieve an incredible increase in a reduction rather in fuel consumption. And quite literally, this model went from being something that would typically do 12 miles per gallon to more like 18 miles per gallon around town. And in fact, when I used to drive these, I could get as much as 22, 23 mpg touring. Now that's not bad for a 5.3 litre V12. Well, we've got a police camera safety van as soon as we enter the road, so, and it's a 40 limit, so let's roar up to 40 in first gear. The thing that was so wonderful about these cars is that they were so incredibly relaxing to drive. Before we started to get cars with much stiffer suspension in the late 80s, typically BMWs for example, cars had this soft, supple suspension, particularly luxury cars like this one. So you literally wafted along serenely, cosseted in this wonderful gentleman's club ambience, but in a very relaxed cruising style. And because it had these tremendous new tyres which have been developed by Dunlop, these low profile ER70 VR15s, that would be the equivalent of a 205 7015. They had tremendous grip. There was nothing really like it on the British car market that could handle the corners in the way that these cars could. And the performance, you can just hear that low drone now, it's like a turbine. There you are, a couple of seconds and you're up to the national speed limit. Not a lot of noise, not a lot of fuss, comfortable, no bone jarring, filling removing suspension for a Jaguar or Daimler of the 1980s. Every component on this was well up to the job, particularly the gearbox. Jaguar chose a General Motors gearbox that had a capacity of up to 400 horsepower for their 292 horsepower V12 engine, and we never had problems with it. In fact, throughout my time with Jaguar, we rarely had the tools off the special tools off the board. Occasionally we'd have one with a rear main oil leak. The cars were very reliable and actually quite dry. Because it's only 3 speeds without a torque converter lock, you actually do much of your driving in third gear. But just to show you, if I pop it into first gear and go into first gear hold, we're doing 30. I'll just change up manually. So that's 40 in first. That's 50 at 4,500 RPM. Second gear now, we're up to 60. And at 60, in second gear, we're at 3,000 RPM. Pop it into third, and it's a very relaxed 2100. So these cars just went on and on and on. And in places where you could speed, for example on the autobahns, the cars were quite incredible. There was a lady once came in to see me in the showroom. She was a wealthy businesswoman, and she wanted my help because she got caught in her Jaguar V12 doing just over 100 miles an hour, and she wanted me to write her a letter saying that that was physically impossible because the Series 3 V12 wouldn't go more than 100 miles an hour. And I explained to her, you could almost get to that speed in second gear in one of these. Everything about these cars is so understated. Everything is so relaxing. Even when you drive them hard, it still seems relaxed. Just as an example here, I'll go from rest on full throttle to 60. So that's full throttle. We're already going 30, 40, 50, 60. Just the low drone of the V12 in the background. No fuss. And just as an example of how great the suspension is on these cars, I'm going to continue at 60 miles an hour on this national speed limit road, and I'm actually going to go over the railway crossing at the same speed. I'm not going to slow down at all. That was a railway crossing and you hardly noticed it. Similarly, when you take corners at speed, it just handles so gracefully, so smoothly. You never feel that the car's getting upset in any way. So here we are, we're continuing at 60 miles an hour. There are 2 fairly sharp bends coming up. And I don't need to slow down. I can just carry on at 60. And you never have any sense that the car might come unglued. It just takes it. That's why for me, this is the ultimate car. I have never ever driven anything more comfortable, more smooth, more refined from any manufacturer as this particular car. I love it.